from doing this. So let's get into some of the things about how to flip a flood house. So first off, let me say that you know, like, this is somewhat new to me. I've had some experience with flood houses on a small level in the past, but this is all pretty new to me. But the cool thing is, what I've learned when all this happened was this is how the 7 fundamentals apply here, and how some basic information, data, and tweaks and things, CYA, things that we can cover, or you know what, can really safeguard us and really, 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 really help us create some substantial wealth with this opportunity. And I'm going to share a quick story. Right after the floods, a friend of mine called me, and I went to meet with him in his office. This was the Friday after the floods, right? The same week, essentially, after the floods. And this friend of mine, he is a uber successful real estate investor. He owns over 1,000 properties in our market, owns 1,000 rental properties. And he had over 150, 160 properties that were damaged in the floods. In the flood and in Harvey. I had properties that were damaged in the flood. Guess what? I don't keep flood insurance on any of my investment properties. My friend who owns 1,000 rental properties, guess what? Doesn't keep flood insurance. I'm not going to get too far into that. Come to our event next month, I'll have more time to talk about it, but it just doesn't make sense for several reasons for an investor. But we first started talking about the damage, like, man, this is overwhelming, this is going to cost us a lot of money, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll tell you what happened next, very, very shortly after that. The look in his eyes changed, and he looked at me, and he's like, he said something to the effect of, we're about to buy more houses than we've ever bought before. He's like, what just happened? He's like, unfortunately for many, is going to be the single greatest transfer of wealth in the Houston area ever. Ever. And it's true. It's absolutely true, because so many people, most of their net worth and their wealth is tied into their home, into their real estate. I closed on a property yesterday, and this is a somewhat high-end property that was valued, and it was on the spreadsheet. It was valued just a few months ago at a solid $550,000. This was a first-time flood. We went under contract and closed it yesterday at $230,000. So the first thing that the seller said to me, and she was mainly working with my acquisitions agent most of the time. So I met her, and she said, we really don't want to sell our house anymore. She's like, we are, but now that time has passed and we see, like, you're getting an incredible deal. She's like, we're still ready to move on and downsize, but she acknowledged it. And there's risk with what we're doing, so I'm not even gonna, sugarcoat that. And that's conversations that Nick and I have had with many of our sellers, is that we're saying, look, I know you think there's $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 of equity that you're walking away from here, and that may be, but it could flood again next month, next week, next year. And so I want you to think about that. So this quote is very, very important here, where it says, successful investing is about managing risk, not avoiding it. And this is from Warren Buffett's mentor. Successful investing is about managing risk, not avoiding it. So my friends, listen to me. If we have hundreds of homes in our market that have been here 20, 30, 40, 50 years, some longer, they've never flooded before, ever. We buy them, and we're going to hold them for 3 months to 3 years. Do you think that's a good way to manage risk? I absolutely do. I absolutely do. So one of the first things that I did right after the floods, essentially during the floods, fortunately at my home, we didn't flood, but I was trapped in. So I started doing research, like this really, after I went through my God, this sucks. I have vacant houses. We have houses on the market that are vacant. I know I've got tenants that have fled. I'm like, this is really bad, but like, come down from my panic mode. Where's the opportunity? What does this opportunity look like? So a pretty common number that I found from researching forums, online, just all types of data, was that most markets that suffer a natural disaster will fully rebound with zero impact after 3 years. Zero impact after 3 years. So that made me feel really good. I'm like, okay, I can weather 3 years. I weathered 2008, 9, 10, 11, and that was like when I was just starting out, and there was rental property was difficult back then in terms of, because so many people were losing their jobs, and there was just so much, blood on the streets, so to speak, in the markets, and it was a rough time for me when I was kind of cutting my teeth, so to speak, as an investor. But I felt really good. I felt really good with that number 3 years. I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. But if you look here, they're talking about some property values are back to what they were before the storm, with sellers getting full asking prices. So Nick and I have been monitoring the MLS on a very consistent basis, where there's a lot of homes that have been renovated and they're popping back up, and they're not listing at a discount. Now, full disclosure, I haven't seen any that have fully closed, but several are pending. So we don't know exactly what they're pending at. But in houses that we buy and we invest in, which is houses that are $100,000 to $300,000, we feel really strong for first-time floods that market values are going to be very close to that. And the same thing here. This reporter mentioned that he expects the housing market to return to a normal state in about 6 months to a year. 6 months to a year. So a lot of really positive information.